All right, so before we begin the webinar, I would like to take a few minutes to talk about the Zoom software. Please leave your camera off and remain on mute for the entire webinar. You can type your questions in the chat at the bottom of the screen. If a few of you want to just type in the chat if you can hear me or not, say yes or no, just to see if the chat is working. Perfect, thank you. Great, so the webinar will be recorded, like I mentioned, and a link sent to you in your email in the next few days. I also have a survey that will be going out in an email. If you fill out the survey, it will help us determine future webinar topics and let us know how we are doing. Today's topic will be about woodland programs in Wisconsin. Our speakers today are Lauren Larson and Matt Molbach. Lauren is the forestry educator for UW-Madison Division of Extension. Lauren works in the northwestern region of Wisconsin and is based out of Eau Claire County. She teaches Learn About Your Land classes and has recently started a Women Woodland Owner program to educate and connect with women woodland owners to resources and professional help. And Lauren, if you want to get your screen share started, please feel free to do so right now.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn my camera off here in a minute. I know the internet at my house can be a little spotty, so I just wanted to say hello. And let me get this set up. All right. Just 1 second. There we go. All right. Nikki did such a great job introducing me. I'm going to jump right into my overview. So the purpose of my portion of the presentation today is to give you an overview of the people and programs that are available to woodland owners in Wisconsin for financial assistance, technical assistance, education, and a few other things. So we're going to start today by talking about the people that are involved in woodland owner programs in Wisconsin. And then after that, we will move on to the programs themselves. And just a disclaimer that this is not an exhaustive list of either the people or the programs, but it is an overview of the common ones that are found up in the northwestern part of the state. And there are others. If you are interested, we can chat more about that later. So let's get started with people. Hopefully this isn't in the way. I'm not sure how to, see if I can hide it. There we go. All right, sorry about that. Let's get started. So the DNR Division of Forestry has a couple of different specialists on staff that work across different areas in the state. So anywhere you live, there is a tax law specialist like Matt, who will be doing the second portion of this presentation. Tax law specialists are folks who administer programs and assist in the management that goes with programs. So Matt will be talking about how he works with folks in MFL and the MFL program itself, but just as a note that there are other programs that Matt can talk with you about if you're interested in learning more. Each area of the state also has a forest health specialist, and their position is a little bit different from the tax law folks in that forest health specialists are a really great diagnostic tool. An example is if you're walking in your woodlands and you notice something that doesn't look right, you can take pictures of it and find your local forest health specialist, give them a call, send them an email, and chat with them about what you're seeing. They can provide some answers and get you started with some management recommendations to help you combat those forest health concerns. And I want to point out really quickly at the bottom of this page, there's a link, and I will be sharing all of my slides with Nikki to share with you all. And when you look at the slides after this presentation, if you're interested, you can actually click on these links and they'll take you right to the links that I'm mentioning. So this one down here will take you to the Forestry Assistance Locator tool, and that will show you excuse me, that will bring you to a list of folks who work within the Division of Forestry. So you can search by county, by specialty, a few different ways of searching, but it will be your first step in getting a hold of someone. On that forestry assistance locator, you'll also find the information for service foresters and cooperating foresters. So service foresters work for the DNR, and they offer broadly planning and technical advice. So a lot of their day consists of doing what's called a landowner walkthrough, where they come to your property and you talk with them about the goals that you have, maybe some forest health concerns that you've seen, and the things that you would like to do to achieve your goals with your woodlands. And from there, they can offer advice. They can help you get started with applying for some of the programs that I'm going to talk about, to help you cost share some of the things that you'd like to do, and just give general feedback on how to get started with a management plan to help you achieve your goals. Cooperating foresters are very similar in nature, and except they charge a fee for their services. They are not employed by the DNR. However, they do write a stewardship contract stating that they will only participate in sustainable forest management, and they have guidelines in which they work. So you do have a guarantee if you work with a cooperating forester. And then something important to know is that some of them do write management plans, and that will come in handy if you're interested in applying for some of these cost share programs. Let's move on to Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. These folks are more associated with prairies, agricultural lands, hayland, pasture land, but they do work with forest land as well. Again, this link in the bottom right, getting started with NRCS, will take you directly to find your local NRCS office if you're interested in reaching out after this presentation to learn more about their programs. So two of the folks that I've worked with the most are farm bill biologists, and they are really hands-on specialists who help you design, develop a plan, and fund projects that revolve around habitat improvement. And that could be, from what I understand, anything from wildlife habitat to pollinator and insect habitat. Soil conservationists work at a higher level, have more in-depth knowledge and resources on conservation planning. So those are the folks that you could reach out to if you had some bigger picture questions about what your land can do and what your goals are for your land. And keep in mind that the NRCS has many other specialists that work on staff. Your best bet is to follow this link and reach out to your local office, express your concerns, ask your questions, and they can then send you to the appropriate person to talk to. So my position with UW-Madison Division of Extension, I am a natural resources educator. If you look on the right, we have folks that work as forestry educators and water educators, and you'll see where we are around the state in this little icon right here. But I just wanted to let you know very quickly that every year we do virtual and in-person classes for woodland owners. We have a ton of different publications that are short, easy reads about everything from timber stand improvement to attracting wildlife. We have our recorded classes on YouTube, which you can use as a self-paced learning. And really, we are the folks that help woodland owners get started. So if you're ultimately still confused and you have questions, you're not sure who to talk to, you can always reach out to us. And if we can't answer your questions, we likely know who can, and we will point you in the right direction. Our website is right here where you can find seasonal information, the links to our recorded classes and our publications. And then this second link is our email. If you ever have questions or are unsure where to get started, we're happy to help. Some other key players and programs that I won't go into depth with, but want to mention. First is County Land Conservation. They offer a lot of information and assistance to help folks like yourselves develop soil and water conservation plans. Wisconsin Woodland Owners Association has different chapters around the state. that offer in-depth learning opportunities, field days, and networking opportunities within the chapters and then also around the state. My Wisconsin Woods is a great website to connect woodland owners to information, property visits with foresters, and they can offer advice on technical and financial assistance. They also do some events and workshops. And then finally, if you're interested in permanently protecting your woodlands, I suggest reaching out to your local land trust to get some more information about that process. And I believe the one in northwestern Wisconsin is now Landmark Conservancy. Okay, so let's move on to programs. We're going to start with state, and state programs in Wisconsin for woodland owners are mostly developed and administered by the DNR Division of Forestry. There's two main ones in this area of the state, and I'm going to use the acronyms not because I love them particularly, but this is how they're referred to. So if you can remember these short little phrases, it's for one, it's a lot easier, but these are the terms that the professionals will use. So hopefully it's less confusing. Matt later in this talk is going to talk about MFL. So I'm going to jump straight into WFLGP, and you'll see why they shorten this and use an acronym, because it's easier than saying Wisconsin Forest Landowner Grant Program. WFLGP is a cost share program that covers up to 50% of the costs to do forestry practices on your woodlands, anywhere between 10 and 500 acres. Keep in mind, to apply for this, you will need a forest stewardship plan on at least 10 acres. But one of the nice things is that the stewardship plan, it can be part of your cost share, so you don't have to foot the entire bill up front. And the way that this works, and it changes every year, is that either priority 1 or priority 1 and 2 areas are funded. So this year we have only been looking at priority 1, which includes stewardship plan development, like I mentioned, tree planting, regeneration, forest health and improvement, soil water protection improvement. So something that's really nice, if you notice, those are pretty vague areas, which means there's a lot of activities that can be involved in any of those priority areas, which means if you're interested in improving the forest health on your property and you have some tree planting and regeneration ideas in mind, you'll include those, and since they're priority 1, that will give you a stronger case for getting funded. And if you are looking at this list and think, man, I'm really interested in some of these priority 2 practices, please use that forestry assistance locator tool that I mentioned and reach out to your local service forester. They can give you more information on if they think priority 2 practices will be funded within the coming years, or just give you some more general information on how that part of the program works. So how to apply. You will not do this alone. You don't have to walk through it blind. You'll start with the forestry assistance locator tool that I mentioned. Find your local DNR forester, and they will come do a walkthrough with you, and they will actually be the ones that submit your application. So they'll be walking you through that. And keep in mind, applications are accepted all year long, but they're awarded on a first come, first serve basis. And that first come, first serve is August 1st, when most projects are funded. So if you have some inspiration after this talk and you get some ideas, you have some time. However, I would urge you to, within the next few months, reach out to your forester and just mention that you are interested in seeing if you might qualify for this, and get the ball rolling to be able to submit for that August 1st deadline. Okay, so we're going to jump over to federal programs. And in the state of Wisconsin, these federal programs are administered by the NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service. We're going to go through 2 of the 3. We're going to talk about EQIP, this first one, and CSP. CRP is across the state of Wisconsin in some areas, but we will not cover this one because it's not as common in the Northwest. And if you're interested in learning more, you can go to the NRCS website or reach out to your local office to find out more. Okay, EQIP, another long phrase, Environmental Quality Incentive Program. EQIP is a cost share program that provides payments for management practices over a 2 to 10-year contract. Your payments will vary depending on where you live and the year, but the flat rate payments will always be based on 65% of the actual cost. At the top, it says required forest management plan. However, if you are looking at this list of practices, there are some that are not related to forestry, such as pollinator habitat, wetland restoration, weed control, stream crossings, anything that isn't related, to forestry, you do not need a forest management plan for. However, if you are looking at these forestry practices and need a management plan, you'll notice in this list that the forest management plan is something that can be cost shared. So again, you don't have to foot that entire bill up front, which is nice. So how to apply? The process is very similar to the state programs. The best way to get started is to reach out to your local NRCS office, which is this first link, set up an appointment with them. They will meet with you to talk about your goals for your land, talk about your proposed project, some practices that you might be interested in, and discuss your eligibility with that proposal. And similar to the state programs, they are accepted all year, but there is a cutoff date for funds. And I apologize, I was not able to find this date online. So if this is something that you're interested in, please use this first link to reach out to NRCS and see what that date is. Something that I want to mention as well is that they do, I mentioned earlier, they do work with folks that have private forest land, but if you have a mixed land cover type property with some other land types like rangeland, pasture land, they also work within those areas. So please consider that the federal programs have a broader scope as far as the land cover types, whereas the state programs typically focus mostly on forest land. Okay, and then CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program. CSP is another cost share program that provides annual payments to address what are called resource concerns. And the list of resource concerns is quite lengthy, but I want to let you know that it changes every year. So if this is something that you decide you're interested in, you reach out and they say, the things that you're interested in aren't the resource concerns that we're looking for, you can always come back the following year or a few years later and see if those resource concerns have changed, because I believe they are updated every year to make sure that they're rotating through different areas that they can be of assistance. The second bullet point, so the CSP is really to help folks undertake additional management to maintain or improve existing conservation practices. So the way that I like to think about CSP and how it differs from EQIP is that CSP is more geared towards folks who have already been doing some management or conservation practices and want to take that management to the next level, rather than getting started, which is more of an EQIP program, is from what I understand. So CSP requires a 5-year contract, and the list is quite extensive of practices that can be funded, everything from forest stand improvement to pesticide applications, tree planting to enhance your wildlife habitat, managing livestock, and many, many more. And if this is something that you're interested in and have already been doing some management, again, go to that NRCS link, which is scattered throughout this presentation, to talk about an appointment time, get some more information, and see if the resource concerns on your land are being funded this year. talk about conservation practices that you're interested in implementing and see if those can be bundled into an application. And then they can also go over the application process with you as well. And I am a broken record here with the with the logistics, but the applications are accepted all year, but there is that cutoff date. So if you are interested, reach out to your local office and get some more information on that cutoff date. Okay. There are a lot of acronyms and a lot of programs and agencies, but I hope that this has given you a good understanding of the two. Matt will go into the one that I skipped, but the two that are really common for both state and federal. And just to recap, we have state programs through the DNR Division of Forestry that are mostly financial assistance. We have Managed Forest Law, MFL, and WFLGP. Management plan is required for both. And the best way to get started is reach out to your local DNR forester to do a walkthrough, discuss a management plan and your eligibility to enroll in those programs. The federal programs through NRCS that we talked about are EQIP for folks getting started that are interested in cost sharing, some conservation practices, and then CSP for folks who have already been doing some conservation practices but want to take that to the next level. A plan is only required if you're interested in forestry practices with EQIP, and you should start by contacting your local NRCS office to get some more information. And then last, we talked about some other areas of programming in the state. So UW-Madison Extension, we have some virtual and in-person classes to help you learn more about your woodlands and be able to better engage in managing those. Wisconsin Woodland Owners Association offers field days and networking if you're interested in learning from your peers and meeting folks like yourself. My Wisconsin Woods offers technical and financial assistance and some in-person workshops. You can reach out to County Land Conservation to talk about conservation planning broadly. And then last is land trusts. If you're interested in permanently protecting your woodlands, those are the folks to reach out to talk about their programs. All right, I hope if you have some questions for me that you wrote them down. I will be here for the Q&A session at the end, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk about MFL.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren, for all that helpful information. And that last slide definitely helped tie it all together. Like Lauren said, if you haven't already done so, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box and we will get to that at the very end. And while Matt is getting his screen up, I will introduce him. Matt is in the Wisconsin DNR Tax Law Forestry Specialist. He is a Wisconsin DNR Tax Law Forestry Specialist for Dunn, St. Croix, and Pierce counties, and is based out of the Menominee office. Matt works with landowners enrolled in the Managed Forest Law, so MFL, and Forest Crop Law programs by helping landowners to practice sound forestry and administering the laws of the program. Matt has been a forester with the Wisconsin DNR for 14 years. All right, thank you, Matt. Oh, I think you are muted.
Oh, thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks for the introduction, Nikki. I too will turn my video off, just make sure we don't have any glitches with everything. But yeah, we'll roll right into the presentation. I guess specifically, talking about managed forest law, but also talking about some of the other tax law programs in the state. We do still have some forest crop law contracts, and I'll just touch on that a little bit too. So particular the overview of the tax law programs in the state. So a little history. Wisconsin does have a very deep history of tax law programs. Going back to 1927 is when forest crop law was first initiated. So almost coming up on 100 years in the state of Wisconsin, which is really nationwide, kind of a model and kind of unique throughout. There have been other states that have tried implementing other programs, but we do have a very rich history in the state. And the main intent of the program, I should back up, the program itself has changed a lot over the years. Forest crop law was around 2785, and then from the 50s to the mid 80s, we had a program called Woodland tax law. And presently we have managed forest law, which I'll mostly be talking about today. That was initiated in 1985, and they say still taking on current contracts in that program. But the main intent of all these tax law programs has been the same. The main thing was to get the cattle out of the woods, stop grazing woodlands. As we all know, that's destructive on many of these woods. And really the main idea and intent is to sustainably manage these private forest lands and give landowners some assistance for doing that. So that's, although the program has changed a lot, that the main intent has really stayed the same in that arena, I guess. So here's kind of just a nice visual throughout the state showing where most of our tax law lands are located. Now this would be managed forest law and forest crop law, kind of a visual. The green areas would be small account lands, and the yellow areas would be large account. So most of the large account would be our industrial lands. If you notice, a lot of those are located in northern Wisconsin, where we've had a lot of these bigger blocks of industrial forest land up in that part of the state. The program continues to grow. As I said, we're just shy of 3.5 million acres in the state of Wisconsin currently enrolled in MFL, and there's still about 63,000 acres of this forest crop law land, which I think those contracts continue to expire. I think the last of those will expire in 2035. So we have a few years with some of those, but so very popular program in the state. There's roughly 10.4 million acres of woodland in the state. And so this is about 30% of our woodland is currently enrolled in these forest tax law programs in Wisconsin. So just to kind of go over the purpose of MFL. I'm not going to read this whole statute. This is actually a state statute, but I just wanted to highlight a big portion of this. Production of future forest crops is a huge part of this program, and just really wanted to touch, it's not necessarily just a reserve program, hands off, just set aside. When your lands are enrolled in this program, we really hold landowners accountable and require some active management of that property. So this is important to keep in mind as we're going through if managed forest law is a good fit for you. It's not for everyone, and really this future forest crop production and practicing sound forestry is a big intent of the program. So benefits of the program, obviously the selling point of this program is the reduced tax rate for the lands being enrolled. Wisconsin property taxes are quite high, in particular productive forest lands that aren't enrolled in the program. So these would be wooded lands that don't have any agriculture associated with it. Even if buildings aren't included on those lands, those woodlands are taxed really high in the state. The statewide average in Wisconsin, I believe, is about $40 per acre per year. And I'll get into more of the specifics, what the current rates in MFL, but it's about $10 an acre for close. So pretty significant savings by enrolling. So that's the selling point, one of the biggest benefits for landowners. Also helping landowners implement their practice invasive species control. As Lauren had mentioned, many of these cost share programs, whether it be federal or state, they require a management plan. So there too, that would be a benefit to landowners enrolled in MFL. Many times that MFL plan will qualify and allow landowners to be eligible for these cost share opportunities. So also a great benefit. And then of course, there's the bigger picture landscape benefits. The economic, as I mentioned before, producing future forest crops Our forest industry in Wisconsin is our second biggest industry, below agriculture being number one. So it is a huge part of our economy in the state. And you know, lands enrolled in this program that definitely benefits the forest industry by requiring landowners to manage their land and supply a steady flow of wood to these markets and to the industry. Also the ecological, you know, clean air, healthy forest, protecting our endangered resources, wildlife habitat. And then I also get into some of the social benefits. Some of these lands are required to be open, or some landowners opt to have these open to public hunting, hiking, sightseeing, cross-country skiing, and that provides a good opportunity to the public, particular folks that don't own land that can recreate on some of these woodlands. So all the benefits of the program. So basically, you know, the landowner's goals and objectives are very important when shaping a plan and you know, doing sound forestry. And really, when we talk sound forestry, you know, there's lots of different harvest methods we use and different things we try to mimic to accomplish these goals and objectives. But really, we're talking about two different things, you know, and sometimes we'll do both of these in practices, but this intermediate or tending, where we're trying to improve or maintain what we have on the landscape. You know, in particular, think of like pine plantations. When we're thinning a pine plantation, this would fall right into that intermediate tending treatment. And then in some cases, we're trying to regenerate, get natural regeneration back into these forests. And that's, like I say, sometimes we're doing harvest methods where we're doing both of these together. But when we're talking sound forestry, that's what we're getting at, that we're either trying to, in this tending stage, improving or maintaining, or we're looking at ensuring we get adequate regeneration. Now, there's lots of challenges throughout the state, but in particular here in western Wisconsin, to accomplishing this sound forestry. Deer browse, invasive species, lack of markets, these are all challenges that we're faced with trying to accomplish this sound forestry. And I do feel fortunate, you know, in the state we can market a lot of this wood, and in some cases we can't. So we look at non-commercial means to still do this sound forestry and accomplish all these things, but definitely can be a challenge at times, and in particular with this invasive species front that we have moving into the state. So minimum eligibility requirements, basically very high level, you know, you need at least 20 acres, and it has to be 80% of it has to be suitable to producing merchantable timber. And there are more specifics. Feel free, if you have more specific questions regarding, you know, how we determine what's suitable, that sort of stuff, we can get those addressed later, or I'd be happy to follow up with any of you. But basically, these are the minimum requirements: 20 acre minimum, 80% productive forest land. So managing other resources, I mentioned, you know, landowners' goals and objectives are very important in this and can really shape which direction we go. And really I think of this slide, you know, it really is a three-legged stool, and in order to be a good fit for the program and success in the program, you know, all three of these things really need to come together. Landowners' goals and objectives, the stand conditions, and the current science, you know, and trying to put all these together. Like I say, we've got sideboards we have to follow within the program, in particular what's sound forestry and sustainable forestry. But we can, within those sideboards, definitely lean one way or the other based on landowners' goals and objectives. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. There is a fair amount of flexibility to meet the landowners' goals and objectives. And then managing other resources, we kind of touched on this, you know, threatened endangered species, archaeological, historical sites, water quality. These are all addressed at the time of the plan. these would all be looked into, and if there are any concerns, that would be spelled out in the plan. And then also before any cutting practice, we make a point of looking at all these resources, and if there are any mitigation factors needed, that's where we would spell that out in the cutting notice, and make sure that those are protected. This cute little critter in this picture is a pine marten, which doesn't really apply so much here in western Wisconsin. It'd be more up in the northeastern part of the state. But here in western Wisconsin, common species that we run into: bald eagles, bats, turtles, and endangered plants, rattlesnakes along the Mississippi River. We run into some of those situations. And like I said before, when we have those on a particular property, we have to be sure to mitigate those and make sure we're not disrupting those species. Archaeological historical sites, common one here in western Wisconsin would be Indian burial mounds and campsites, that sort of thing. We run into that quite often, and there too try to mitigate those in particular when it comes time for timber harvest, make sure we're not disrupting those sites. So I kind of alluded to this, talked to a little bit about the current rates. Open MFL, the current rate is $2.04 per acre. And what I mean by open MFL, so in the managed forest law, landowners have the option of having the lands open to public hunting or closed to public hunting. If landowners open it to public hunting, they can't restrict who is on the property and who's hunting. There's no restrictions. By having it closed, you can still allow hunting, but then you have basically you have control who's out there doing the hunting. So that's the difference between the open versus the closed. So you can see that there's more of an incentive for landowners to open their lands to the public. They get a better tax break. They'd be paying $2.04 per acre versus $10.20 per acre for the closed lands. As I mentioned before, the statewide average is $40 per acre per year. So even in that closed rate, I mean, you're looking at almost $30 per acre per year savings in the MFL program, which can add up on bigger acreages. In St. Croix County, I've seen as high as $120 an acre per year for just productive forest land. That's not in any buildings on, just productive forest land, which that's a record for me. But I know that this rate changes throughout the state, and what I suggest doing is looking at your tax bill and or talking to your assessor to really figure out what you're being charged per acre. Because as I mentioned, it does vary throughout the state. Even within my 3 counties, it varies quite extensively as you head further west, and assessed values of lands go up quite a bit. So I mentioned the public recreation open lands. This is a great opportunity for folks that don't own land that can find these lands for hunting, fishing, hiking, cross-country skiing, and sightseeing. And on the bottom of this website, you'll see there's a link that I put on there. This is the link to our open tax law website. If you click on that, you'll see a statewide map, and basically you can zoom in and see all the lands that are open to public recreation. So that's a very useful website. And very helpful, looking at that. But that's also a great benefit to the citizens of the state and everybody, to get out and recreate, even if they aren't citizens, I guess, just to the public in general. So lands that are ineligible for MFL, just kind of go over this real quick. Any lands developed for industry, be an example that's not eligible. Buildings are not allowed on MFL, and no buildings at all, even if it's a dilapidated building. If it has walls and a roof on it, it's considered a building and not allowed on MFL. So that's important to keep in mind. You can just basically the remainder of the land could be enrolled. You would just keep an area out around those buildings or outlots. Pastured land is not allowed. Recorded plats are not allowed. Delinquent tax land is not allowed as well. And then we did talk about CRP a little bit. Just want to mention MFL lands cannot be enrolled in CRP. We will allow CRP lands into MFL, but by putting it into MFL, you would not be eligible for either renewing your CRP contract back into that federal conservation reserve program. Leasing, this is one that's changed over the course of time, but is now, as of 2017, is allowed again on MFL lands. So landowners could lease their lands for hunting, fishing, sightseeing, cross-country skiing. The main thing is that they're not doing something that's incompatible with the practice of forestry, or something that would prohibit the landowner from accomplishing their forestry practices that they're required to do. Otherwise, leasing is allowed. So within all our tax law lands, managed forest law lands in particular, landowners have the option to participate in group certification. And this is really driven in the marketplace. The two big certification groups in managed forest law that we currently offer would be the Certified Tree Farm Program and the FSC, or Forestry Stewardship Council programs. And basically this is a third party that audits our program, oversees everything. And then we have random audits. Matter of fact, I was just through one of these this past summer in my work area. And with these random audits, we have, as I mentioned, third-party auditors that come to our site. Typically, they want to go out in the field and look at some of these sites and basically make sure that we're doing everything that we're doing in the managed forest law program. I have found out over time that there is a little difference in certified land versus just not, being in the managed forest law, and there is a little more accountability on the landowners, that they're keeping track of stuff, and in particular with chemical use on MFL, that we're recording that, and basically they just want to make sure that we're not putting prohibited chemicals on these MFL lands. And if we are using restricted chemicals, that we have a plan in place and we're doing it for good reason. Because there are quite a few chemicals that we do use for forestry purposes quite often, matter of fact, that are on the restricted list. However, like I said, we just want to make sure that we have a good plan in place and that we're using it for appropriate reasons. But certification is a great thing. It does open up landowners options for markets in the future. I've actually seen it in Dunn County, where I had a landowner that the wood wasn't certified, and the mill didn't even want the pulpwood. So we had to turn around and quick get the land certified, so then they would take it, but they didn't even want the wood because it wasn't certified. So I think it does, from that standpoint, really benefit the landowner to have it certified. But ultimately, this is the landowner's choice whether they want to be in or out of the program. As I mentioned earlier, talking with your assessor, really figuring out what you're being taxed at is a very important part, when weighing whether or not to enroll in the managed forest law program. Like any government program, you really need to weigh the obligations versus the benefits of the program. As I mentioned, that production of forest crops, you're gonna more than likely have to do something within that contract period. And it's landowners will be held accountable for those practices. So it's as I mentioned, it's not for everyone, and that's what to make an informed decision. It's really helpful to see what that benefit would be, what that savings benefit would be in the program versus not. You know, there are parts of the state, I know northern Wisconsin in particular, where productive forest land might only be $15-20 an acre. As I mentioned, you know, $10.20 per acre. If it's only $5 more per acre per year to not be in any program, you know, for some folks that's not worth it. So it's really good to get that information to make an informed decision. So Lauren kind of touched on this. I just want to go in more detail. This is a very helpful tool when finding foresters throughout the state, this forestry assistance locator. And you'll see on this map, there's kind of a region, and the link is also on the bottom of this as well that you can click to get to this. I also included on the right is talk about the tax law forestry specialists and service areas throughout the state. There's kind of a statewide list showing all the different specialists throughout the state. So that's kind of a good visual. And this next slide just kind of goes into the forestry assistance locator in a little more detail. Hopefully, I apologize if this is a little small yet. I tried to blow it up as big as I could, but I see it is kind of small yet. But basically, you can click the counties where your land is located, and then you go down and it selects a forester type. As Lauren mentioned, you know, we got DNR service foresters, you know, the folks that deal with non-tax law assistance, and then folks like myself, the DNR tax law forestry specialists that work within the tax law programs, and then cooperating foresters. So you can click one of those, you know, and then there's other options, you know, as far as desired services that they provide. You can go down if you're looking for, you know, timber sale establishment, you could click on that box and really query what you're looking for. And then it'll send up a list of those folks. And I guess if you're interested in enrolling in managed forest law, really what you need to do is hire a cooperating forester. And you need to make sure that those cooperating foresters are what we call certified plan writers. And there's actually a box you can check for that down below on this forestry assistance locator. But that means that they have the training through the state of Wisconsin to write managed forest law plans, and then they can come out, walk the property, visit with you, you know, on your goals and objectives, and write that plan for you and get that squared away. So that really is the process, is to hire a certified plan writer and get moving on that. Couple deadlines just to keep in mind. So June 1st is always the deadline to have a plan submitted. So, and then that plan would take effect the following January. So where we stand right now, if you were to call and say you want to enroll as soon as possible, the soonest you could enroll in the managed forest law would be January 1st, 2023. And you would have to have a plan submitted to your DNR tax law forestry specialist by June 1 of 2022. So that's kind of the deadlines. Keep in mind, June 1, and it would take effect the following January 1st. Yeah, those are the main talking points with that. If you're on the fence whether or not to enroll it in the program, and you just want somebody to come walk the property, give you general recommendations, as Lauren mentioned, that's where you would click that DNR service forester box. And those would be the folks, my counterparts, that could come out, walk the property, and just give you basically recommendations, property recommendations on where things should go. And if you were to enroll it, maybe what it would look like. It's kind of a good starting point if you're on the fence and not really sure if MFL is a good program for you. Then that DNR service forester list would be the one to check. So those are really the processes and steps, I guess, to enroll into MFL. So with that, I guess we can open it up for questions. I think we've got 10 minutes or so left, right?
Yes. We do. Great. Thank you, Matt and Lauren, for both of those informative talks. I will moderate the questions at this time. If you do want to start your video and have more of a discussion, please feel free to turn your camera on and unmute yourself. I'm going to start with a few of the questions in the chat box. The first question we had was about wetland designation. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull the chat box up. My thing is not working very well. Okay, so this person has a managed forest law coming up for renewal in 2025. They heard that DNR will be designating wetlands on properties as unproductive and will remove that acreage from the tax exemption. Is this true?
So can you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. So this person has MFL and it's up for renewal in 2025. They heard that DNR will be designating wetlands on property as unproductive and will remove that acreage from the tax exemption. And they just wanted to make sure if that's true or not.
Yeah, so to answer that question, wetlands, if it clearly is a wetland and not producing the minimum requirements, eligibility requirements, we would have to count that as non-productive acreage. And depending on the total parcel size, as I mentioned earlier, you can have up to 20% non-productive on any given parcel. So on 40 acres, you could have 8 acres of wetland included, not meeting the productivity requirements. And there is some concern with this, in particular with emerald ash borer, that some of these areas maybe that 25 years ago were productive are no longer going to be productive after emerald ash borer comes through. And that's a whole nother subject. But, there's obviously some risk involved there enrolling any ash swamps into the program at this point. I don't know if I answered that question entirely. I guess with the wetland determination, I didn't quite understand that part of it, I guess.
Okay, well, thank you. Another question is regarding public access to property for recreational purposes, specifically like hunting and the risk of injury. They understand that DNR protects landowners for any liability. Historically, has there been any lawsuits against landowners even after the DNR protective laws?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that issue has come, or that question, I should say, has come up before with landowners asking whether or not they have the lands open or not. I know there's 1.1 million acres that are currently open throughout the state of the 3.5 million. So we have lots of open land. And as far as I'm aware of, I've never heard of any issue like that. Like I say, that's protected under general statutes, I believe.
Great, thank you. Another question that could probably be answered by both speakers today is, are there any programs available for forests of 9 acres that essentially border national forest and a lake, or just more of a broader question, are there any programs for woodland owners with less than 10 acres?
Yeah, I can, excuse me, I can jump in on that a little bit. So when we talked about the federal programs through NRCS, I know EQIP does not have a minimum acreage requirement. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure about CSP, but if you're interested in that, I would reach out and see if CSP is one that doesn't have an acreage requirement. And Matt, I'm gonna ask you about Wiffle Gap and MFL if you can, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so MFL, as I mentioned, it used to be 10 acres, now it's up to 20 minimum. Wiffle Gap, that's a great question. I don't believe there's a minimum acreage on that, so I think landowners would still be, but you'd have to have a management plan in place would be the key with Wiffle Gap. But yeah, that's a great point, Lauren, that I know there's been other landowners that have asked. CSP and EQIP are great opportunities for smaller land holdings that aren't eligible for managed forest law.
Yeah, I just looked up WFLGP, and that's also a 10 acreage requirement. So I would start with contacting NRCS about EQIP for sure, and potentially CSP.
Great, thank you. Another question that came in is, can you clarify more on MFL requiring open access to the public, but one can also lease the land for hunting? And then other follow-ups is, so you can post the land only for hunting using the signs that you displayed. Just about the process of how open access works.
Yeah, in 2017, thankfully, the law was changed. There used to be a loophole that landowners didn't necessarily have to provide access, and unfortunately, some folks took advantage of that and had landlocked pieces where they were getting the tax break and it wasn't technically accessible to landowners. But in 17, that was changed, and all lands have to be, all MFL lands, forest crop law did not get changed, but all MFL lands have to provide access. And we're working through most of those kind of case by case, or I should say complaint by complaint, that we deal with them, take them seriously. And it's either they provide access and get access, or the land's got to be closed to the public. That's correct. The signage, there's specific signage that we recommend. If landowners want to designate a specified route to those lands. I'll be honest, most landowners don't designate a specified route. So then it really comes down to what makes the most sense. A lot of times it's parking on a town road and walking in where it makes sense to get to those lands. But landowners can specify a route that they want. And if they do that, it should be on that MFL map, and it should be posted properly on the land. Did I answer everything? I thought there was maybe one more question in there.
I think you got that. We have a few minutes left, so if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question or a clarifying one from what I already asked, please do so now. And to unmute, all you have to do is at the bottom left-hand corner, there's a microphone, and you click that and it should unmute.
Matt, I have a question that I get asked often about MFL. And since it is such a long contract, what happens if the landowner's goals change or they want to add something to the plan? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, good question, Lauren. And that's really, I would say, I get asked a lot of times what my role actually is, as the specialist, and it is more administrative and facilitative, not so much hands-on, but that's where I recommend contacting the tax law forestry specialist and really working through those details with them. Or if they are already working with a cooperating forester, there too, the cooperating forester can kind of work with them and the specialist to get that plan modified. But that's a great question. And, we have so much land constantly transferring in the program, and chances are those goals and objectives don't line up with the original owners. So that's also a great point, just to check in with your tax law specialist and really have those conversations and see what possibilities you have of modifying the plan. But yeah, we do that all the time, updating landowners' plans to meet their goals.
Great, thank you. And I think I just got one question pop up. Oh, I think it was just a comment. So, all right, well, I think that is all the questions for today. Thank you both for speaking with us. This concludes the webinar for today. So yeah, the email is on the screen, as you can see. So if you have any more follow-up questions, or if you would like clarifications, please feel free to email me or the presenters today. Well, thank you. Bye.
Thanks.